hosts, Mike Tuman and Paul Burvid. Every Saturday, noon to 1 on WRMN, 1410 AM, the Fox River Valley Media Network. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. The studio number here is 847-931-1410. Give us a call. Participate in the show. The text number is 505-926-1410. Or you can hit us up in the comments on the Facebook Live channel of WRMN 1410. So, how you doing, Paul?
Good. How are you?
I barely made it here this morning.
Snow?
No, my Jeep went. I guess the Jeep manual transmissions more recently for the last couple of years have a glitch in them where it tells you that you're riding the clutch even if you're not riding the clutch, and then it puts you into low power mode.
Oh, wow.
And so I was on 90 there, and I started going to low power mode, and I'm like doing 30 in the right lane, and I was between, I guess, the longest distance between exits. And I finally got off all the way at Arlington Heights Road and had to double back and then putt my way back home and grab my girlfriend's minivan and get out here. So.
Well, I went in a ditch the other day, so I know your feeling. It's kind of bad.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to take that in. This will be the third time they're going to have to reset the brain box.
Wow.
Yeah, so I could get a if I wanted to, I could get one of those little electronic chip things that you put in there, and then you can reset it yourself. But that's like $300.
Yeah.
But if this is going to be annoying for like every once a month having to go into the dealer and sit around for hours while they figure out that they got to plug in the thing to reset it, it might be worth the $300.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to talk about the Great Lakes Navy. I don't want to say just the freshwater Navy because then you get mixed up with the brownwater Navy over in Vietnam and the river boats during the Civil War, but pretty much limited to the Great Lakes. And I know the last time we had warships, major warships and battles on the Great Lakes was the War of 1812. That
is correct.
And
when there was it was up by Mackinac Island and all of that. There's a fort up there.
Yeah, there's I'm thinking Lake Ontario. Now, like I said, when I grabbed my girlfriend's minivan there, I left my cell phone in my Jeep right in front of the house. And I do a lot of research there, and I write down notes. And I would usually get in early and go to the Blue Box Cafe, which is a great place to have a sandwich, quiet, sit at a table, and do some research. So I'm kind of shy on the notes there, but I do realize that as a result of the War of 1812 and a treaty, I guess, in 1817 between the British and us, because Canada was under the British at then. There was no independent Canada, right? That neither side could have warships on the Great Lakes that would have more than 100 tons of cargo capacity, which is not a lot. That's 20,000 pounds. No, wait. 2,000 pounds on a ton, 200,000 pounds. But really, that's not a lot when you consider a big major vessel, so. And the other thing is it could have nothing larger than one 18-pounder gun. And again, my research is a little off there, so I don't know what the exact caliber is of that. And so you don't hear a lot about the warships after the War of 1812 until World War II rolls around. And then I don't know if we're in violation of the treaty or the British just didn't say anything or we just didn't care. So we had 3 warships on the Great Lakes, specifically on Lake Michigan. Right, Paul?
That's correct. What happened is right after the attack at Pearl Harbor, they knew they were going to be needing to ramp up and get carrier pilots ready. And at the time, actually during the war, the United States had 29 fleet and light carriers, but in the war we had 122 what they call escort carriers. But Commander Richard Whitehead proposed that so that the Japanese and the Germans through submarines could not attack them when they were training, he said, why don't we use the Great Lakes? And this had come right after the Depression. And Great Lakes steamers were very luxurious. They had room for like 1,500 guests, and they had 500 rooms, but they were going downhill. So what he proposed is immediately purchasing two of these. One of them was the first one he purchased was the C&B.
Yeah.
And they converted it into the Wolverine. And what they did is they took the decks off of it and they put a flight deck on it, and it became IX-64. Those are designations given to auxiliary ships. And then 6 months later, the SS Greater Buffalo became the Sable, and that was IX-81. Now, the C&B Wolverine had a wooden flight deck of approximately 500 feet long. Now, what's really unusual is at that time, I think the Ranger was the smallest carrier, and it was 700 feet long. Now, these were unique because, as you said, they were made for interlake travel, freshwater, but they were also the only ever two coal-fired
steamers,
and they were paddle wheels.
Yeah, side paddles.
And that's correct. And they put a tower on them to give the pilots, practice and landing. And neither of them had hangars, and the Sable had a metal deck. They had no hangars, and what a pilot had to do was he had to do 8 takeoff and landings. And the takeoffs were primarily from Great Lakes Naval Air Station in Glenview. And they would fly, and they would take off, and they would land and take off and land and take off. They did that 8 times. And during the course of the war, 17,000 pilots were qualified through this. That was about almost a third of the naval aviators in World War II. And one of them, future President George Bush,
yes,
flew off the Sable. So it's a very interesting concept. And not only was it for the pilots, it was actually for the deck crews so that they could get experience. So you had enlisted, ranks and officers getting experience, and you had the pilots getting experience. And it was a fantastic concept. And they only, I think, lost 8 pilots, and they lost about 300 planes because since they didn't have hangars, if the plane was damaged, they just pushed them off the side. And that's interesting because now there's an effort to get some of those planes, and they're actually putting them in both Midway and O'Hare have one of those planes, and then the Air Zoo in Kalamazoo and some other air museums have them. They're salvaging them, they're picking them up, and then they're restoring them, and they're putting them back on display, and they're becoming a part of history now instead of just being at the bottom of the lake. But the sad thing is the mussels that were the invasive species,
zebra mussels,
they're starting to attack the metal on the planes. So there's an effort to accelerate this. Otherwise, the planes won't be able to be restored.
Yeah, and I would like, I was going to try to figure out what the actual amount of sorties were from those 2 aircraft carriers, because I think they would have the record for the war for the actual amount of sorties flown off of them.
They do, and it was they said between the 2 of them, they logged 135,000 landings. So I don't know how many, is a landing each time considered a sortie,
Yes.
or would you have to? Yeah.
No,
So then it would be 135,000 of them.
Yeah, that is impressive. And now one of the things, one of the great things that I think really won the war in the Pacific for us is soon, and like you said, the guy in 1939, he proposed this long before Hitler invaded Poland. All right, so they knew a war was coming. They knew a war was coming in the East too, and he proposed this training thing and taking these paddle wheels of these luxurious liners, and those were the biggest ones in the Great Lakes fleet. And so they take the tops off of them, and like you said, the Wolverine had a wooden landing thing of 500 feet, and the Sable had 550 feet. Now, you said like the Ranger was the smallest with 700 feet, and then the average one had 850 feet of runway for deck for these planes to take off on. Right? So with the Sable, they tested a lot of paint, non-skid paint, which helps the wheels get grip, helps you land and everything. And that thing, I guess, was coated, repainted several times using several different types to see which had the best grip. Because if you just went with a steel deck, that's why most decks were wooden, because they're porous and they have friction, you know.
Give to them, yeah.
Yeah,
too.
so the planes can land and stop, or their wheels could get grip to keep them going straight. And so later on in the war, when we were building massive aircraft carriers, we were also building a thing called victory ships, which were merchant ships. And the quickest they put one of those things together was 30 hours. They put an entire victory ship together in 30 hours because there was a race between a bunch of these, what do you call it?
Builders. It was Kaiser Aluminum and then another one, and that was on the West Coast. You're right. They got them down to a little over a day.
Yeah. And so if you took the tops off of these things, right, and moved the stacks to the side a bit, right, you had a ready to go, you put a wooden thing on it, and you could fit 8 to 12 planes on there. And rather than build one massive aircraft carrier, you could have a flotilla of 10 of these, and you got 80 to 120 aircraft. And they didn't have armor on them. They didn't have a lot of anti-aircraft guns, but what you want it to be away. You want it to be far enough away to provide air support, either to a landing or something. And we saw that take effect at Leyte Gulf, where one of the things that happened was the Yamato, the biggest battleship ever made, got just over the horizon from these, what they called Jeep carriers. And it started just laying in heavy artillery onto them. And one of the things was that these 18-inch guns, they would hit the side of these mini aircraft carriers and they would go right through, like completely through them, and then blow up in the water outside. So a lot of them survived, but I think we wouldn't have had a lot of those if they hadn't approved the concept in the Great Lakes with the Wolverine and the Sable.
And also those smaller carriers were vital in the defeat of the German submarine war, because those formed the basis of task forces with escort destroyers, and they were able to, their hunt and killer groups. And that's actually how we were able to capture the U-505 out near Bermuda. And then it was through a hunter killer task force. And then when they surfaced, they tried to scuttle it, and they failed, and then they towed it in to, I believe, initially Bermuda, and then they that's when we got one of the Enigma machines. So that concept proved very vital to that war effort.
Yeah, now we have and it used to be like the cruisers and battleships would have a couple of float planes with the catapults that will launch them off, but that's only a couple, maybe 2 or 4. And then
they would mostly have 2 planes each.
You can only fly so long and well, the float planes could fly a little longer. They're not designed really for combat. But then you take a Jeep carrier like that that's got 8 to 12 planes, and you could fly 8 different sorties in 8 different directions, every point, most points of compass. You could fly out and you could carry armament on there, and you could carry arms on there, like bombs or depth charges. And you could be on in the crow's nest of the tallest battleship out there that's escorting a convoy, and you're only going to see to the horizon, and you're only going to have eyes to see a periscope so much. But when you're up higher, you can see the outlines of those submarines from up on top a lot easier, and then radio in their locations.
That's true.
So it's a good.
To that point, though, a lot of people don't know this, that a lot of ships were built in the Midwest and particularly in Chicago, in the Chicago area, using that concept, because the ship my father was on were LSTs, and they were built in compartments. They prefabbed them, and then they welded them together, and then they were like a big jigsaw puzzle. It was, again, places like Kaiser Aluminum and things like that. That was pretty vital to both the Liberty ships and the LSTs, and I think they made some escort destroyers nearby, actually in Chicago, I believe, because I've seen pictures of them, launching them from into the Chicago River to go down the Mississippi. So that proved to be a very vital concept in strengthening the war effort, both for us and for our allies, because we made those ships for our allies too.
Yeah. And we're talking about warships in the Great Lakes with guns on them. You had the USS Wilmette, which was God, I had the name in the top of my head, but it has a very sad story. One, it suffered a mutiny. So it was, like you said, it was a luxury liner, and they were taking a group of well-to-do people from Cicero all the way over to I guess Michigan City, and the captain apparently didn't feed the crew the proper dinner and lunch. They didn't get their ration of potatoes. And I'm like, wow, right? And they mutinied. So if something like not getting your potatoes, right, would cause you to mutiny, I can only imagine how poorly they treated these guys. And this was in like 1913. That was one thing. Of course, they locked them up, and I didn't do any further research to see what happened to them, but they relieved the captain. It's like finally someone said, you got to be a pretty
potatoes. Yeah,
you got to be a pretty bad captain if you got this luxury liner where you're feeding all these people, and the people that are paying good price to go out there, they're not going to put up with potato soup without anything. So you got all this food there. And why are you treating the guys that are shoveling the coal into the engines, like that? Unless you're just a
Captain Bligh.
Captain Bligh. I want to say Captain Queeg, but Captain Bligh type. Saving the water for the breadfruit. And so then the next thing happened that actually was the second most deadly civilian liner catastrophe, other than the Titanic, because the ship that became the Wilmette had not capsized, but it had listed to its side in the Chicago River.
The Eastland,
that's it, the Eastland listed aside, and 800 people were lost. Oh, great.
All right. Hello, caller. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hey, Larry.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
All right.
Mike, it's interesting. You're talking about ocean disasters. I'm going on a cruise tomorrow.
Well, stay safe, and
Absolutely.
Stay near an exit in case you start listing.
Yeah, what happened with the Eastland was they had like a chronometer And what happened is no one's ever going to know exactly what happened, but everybody got on board the ship and kind of went to the north side of the ship to watch the other boats. There were like 4 or 5 boats about to go to Indiana, for Michigan City, Indiana, for an outing, and just to see what's going on. And the boat tipped over. And what happened, ironically, was the Titanic rule affected them because then they had too many lifeboats. People don't know that. So they had way too many lifeboats, and the weight of the lifeboats also caused it to tip over.
Yeah, and they were but they were also in the Chicago River when this happened.
That's right. They were like, if you know where the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is and then where the old traffic court is, directly across of that. And there's often been a rumor that George Hallis was on that ship. No, he wasn't. He was going to be going that day, but when no one saw him, but whatever, they thought he was killed, and no, he wasn't. And there was also a story that Jack Benny was also on that. Well, what he did was, after the Eastland was recovered, and salvaged, it became the USS Wilmette.
Yes.
And it was sunk during after World War One. No, I'm sorry. The USS Wilmette sunk the German sub that had been touring. So there's a German sub in Lake Michigan.
Really?
Yes, there is. There's a World War One German sub in Lake Michigan.
Yeah, it was gunnery practice at
that's correct.
The Army Reserve Station up there, Sheridan.
Right. I've read stories. Well, not exactly that they weren't sinking it, so they kind of opened up the hatches. So here, let's make it go quicker. We don't know. Probably a combination of both. But Jack Benny served in the Navy during World War One, and then somehow he may have been on the Wilmette when it was training ship, but then they made it out to be the Eastland. And guess who was the lawyer who defended the owners of the Eastland from really getting hit with punitive damages? You know who it was?
Clarence Darrow.
That's right. Very good. Clarence Darrow. He's often seen as the working man lawyer, but he wasn't exactly working man for trying to save. I think the worst is the captain of the ship got in a little trouble, but for the most part, that was it. About 900 people were killed. Okay?
So they were all from a Western Electric. It was a company picnic.
Oh, brutal.
And what's really sad was there was all the young ladies that were secretaries. There was like a fashion, like a beauty pageant. And they were going to go there, and that was like the big thing. That's why they had so many young people on there to go to this beauty pageant. And something happened. A boat went by, or somebody jumped in the water, and everybody went to the side, and that's when it caused it to be unstable.
Right, and with, like I said, with the addition of all the lifeboats, too, that didn't help the situation. And the ship's design was faulty. There had been other problems with the ship. So basically, you had a comedy of errors. And also,
we're going on break now, Larry. So we're going to call back after the break, or we keep you on hold.
All right, whatever you want to do.
All right, thank you. We just said the Eastland, which was, of course, second only to the Titanic, so would only stand to believe. But Larry's a military expert, and especially when it comes to naval disasters. So, Larry.
Yeah.
So,
most people don't know this, but more passengers were killed on the Eastland than the Titanic. Now, when Titanic lost about 1,500 people, that was crew and passengers. The Eastland was was mostly all passengers.
Yeah, there were only 5 crew lost on the Eastland, I believe. Right.
And also, if people want to do something real interesting, I don't recommend it today, but at Bohemian National Cemetery, located in Chicago on the north side by Pulaski and Bryn Mawr, right next to Northeastern, is a large section of graves of the Eastland disaster.
Oh, okay.
Also buried not too far away is the mayor of Chicago, Cermak, who was killed February 15th, 1933 by Giuseppe Zangara in Miami.
Yeah, and getting on a tangent there, many believe that Giuseppe there was trying to kill Roosevelt.
That's true.
But in my belief, he definitely hit his target. It was Cermak, because the mob was just getting creamed by Cermak. They're just
true too. But I mean, everybody's dead who was associated with that. But the one thing, when you read the newspaper stories, what happened was the woman next to Zangara took her purse and was hitting him when he was firing the weapon, which is why he missed allegedly. Because I think I read her obituary. She died like in 1961, and her claim to fame was she saved Roosevelt's life. So I don't know what that means. That came up because when Roosevelt was killed, when Cermak was killed, the Century of Progress was about to start, okay? And the mob wanted the concessions. There's a movie, Untouchables, called The Unknown Assassin, which makes that case. Pardon me?
It's called A Gun for Zangara.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. It came out like 2 episodes of it. I actually have it. You're right.
Yeah, I think it was like 61 or something like that, or 62. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They made 2 untouchable movies, sort of, with Robert Stack. One was that one you just described. I've seen The Unknown Assassin, Gun of Zangara, and the one with the train where the story was they were trying to get Al Capone off the train. You get that in the Untouchable series. I don't know what to make of all that, but it's real interesting walking around because I'm a cemetery walker, as you know. It's good exercise and it's free, believe it or not. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but I go to cemeteries. I'm a cemetery geek, and it's interesting walking around seeing the graves of the plot there at Bohemian National Cemetery. So, it's a fun place to go. But actually, people, when you
Larry,
talk about
do you ever watch the Faces of the Forgotten YouTube channel?
No, I haven't.
Okay, there's a guy that goes around. He's moved now. He actually flew a Avenger recently that crashed in Arizona, but I believe he's an architect. He's got a YouTube channel, and he covers a lot of the history. Actually, Marla and I met him when he was doing a live download, but he's really good. And then one of the police officers that got killed, the 2 together, I can't think of the name right now. I told him about his grave being in disrepair, and he went over there and checked it out at Holy Sepulchre. So
really nice.
it's called Faces of the Forgotten.
Oh, there we go.
I'll have to remember that.
That is. That's exactly the thing.
But you were talking about worst ship disasters. The worst ship disaster happened January 30th of 1945, where I think there was the Soviet sub U-21 sunk the Wilhelm Gustloff, and 9,400 people were killed. They were this was a German passenger ship, was in dock, and it was trying to get the refugees out of the Baltic countries, escaped the Russians, and was sunk. And a guy who claims he survived it is the actor Eric Braeden. You remember him?
Nope.
Rat Patrol. Rat Patrol.
Yeah, the Rat Patrol. He was in Escape from Planet of the Apes. He was in Titanic.
He was in that movie we talked about last week, the Forbin Project, too. He's the main protagonist in that.
That's right. He claims he's a survivor. Could be. I don't know. Everyone, it's like when I used to read Titanic survivors, all these survivors said they were survivors, and just who knows, okay? But anyways, you guys do a great job. Mike, if you want to plug our thing we're going to be doing March 15th, I appreciate that. And thanks, guys. You guys mean a lot to us veterans, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Take care, Larry.
Okay, Larry's also a member of Post 104, American Legion out of Schiller Park, Illinois. Right. And what he's talking
Proud member.
Yeah, talking about is that on the 15th of March at the Post 104 American Legion Schiller Park Community Center at 4501 on 25th Avenue in Schiller Park at 5 o'clock. Doors are going to be opening at 5 o'clock, and the movie's going to start at 6. We're going to be showing The Flying Deuces with Laurel and Hardy. So it's a great movie. This will be the first time I've seen it on the big screen. I mean, I saw it on a 13-inch black and white television when I was a kid, but it's a fantastic movie, and we're doing it as a fundraiser for our post. So it's $10 to get in the door. We're going to be selling some snacks and some drinks. Bring a lawn chair if you want to be more comfortable, and watch the movie and have a good time. It's age appropriate for almost everyone.
Right. That movie was with also Charles Middleton, who played Ming the Merciless in the Flash Gordon series, and also James Finland's Finlayson.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I don't know if I say his name right. Pardon me?
Finlayson?
Yeah, he's in the movie. He was in a lot of the protagonists. Laurel Hardy movies. You always had some guy.
Well, they worked in crews. They had crews that did all the same movies, like Humphrey Bogart, Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre, and even a lot with what's the guy, King John or Prince John.
Alan Hale.
No, not Alan Hale. Alan Hale was Little John. Talking Prince John in Errol Flynn's Robin Hood. Why can't I remember his name? Claude Rains. Claude Rains. So
Claude Rains. Okay.
See, all these guys are like
Peavy was in. Yeah.
They're in the same crew all the time. You see them all making the same. Right. John Wayne had a crew of guys. You always see at the same time.
Oh yeah, like Ward Bond. Yeah, I mean, Frank Sinatra too. If you were a friend of Frank, you kept working in films.
Yeah, and then Clint Eastwood. You look at all of his movies as all the same actors playing different characters.
Jack Nicholson did the same thing. You saw The Last Detail, the bartender in Last Detail. He was the bartender in his other movies.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, I'm going to get off the phone. Thanks for your great work, and talk to you later.
Bye, Larry.
Getting back to the Eastland.
Guys, see you, Paul and Mike. The best. Bye-bye.
Eastland, there, I guess because it had such a bad reputation and everything, what with the mutiny and then the semi-capsizing, I bet you the U.S. government got it cheap.
Oh, I'm sure.
And like you said, luxury liners were coming out of the Depression, and people didn't have a lot of money, and they weren't going to spend it on taking a boat ride and everything. So those things were just collecting dust. It would cost more to take them out in the lake than you can make on passage. So the government gets the Eastland, and they put 2 4-inch cannons on them for gunnery practice. But that is in violation of the treaty we had with the British, because that's bigger than an 18-pounder, and that warship with the 2 guns on it definitely had a higher tonnage than just 100 tons. So I'm sure the British just either waived that or ignored it or didn't see what was happening. But so they did a lot of gunnery practice for deck guns, and specifically getting back to what do you call it, the Liberty ships. I was calling Victory ships, I'm sorry. But the Liberty ships had, they put deck guns on those, to protect them from submarines and maybe some aircraft. But a lot of times the submarines, rather than wasting torpedoes, knew that they could use the 88 millimeter, anti-aircraft guns on deck guns, and they could sink that ship from, 5 miles away and be outside of the range. So why waste if there's no destroyer around, cruiser or aircraft in the air, you just sit there and gun at them. But then you put the merchant marine on and give them guns, and they could fire back. That's another interesting thing, is that I don't know if it was a war legend or whatever, but they would bring tanks up onto the decks of these ships with their guns ready to go in case they saw a submarine or something. Then they would use the anti-tank gun on the tank to fire back at the submarine. I think that's a lot of legend, because I don't think you have a gunner on the merchant marine that's trained to use an anti-tank gun inside a tank turret. What do you think, Paul?
I don't know. Maybe on a LST, but I don't think maybe on on another merchant ship.
The complications just go through my head, like just the gunnery trajectories and making the solution for the round to get anywhere near that target at like 5 or 10 miles away. It's got to be more luck than anything else. It's like one of the
other thing is they might have to shoot to below their
waterline.
Yeah, and so that might be quite difficult. They might have to do it from the side or something like that. Yeah,
but that what was it? I was just watching a thing on YouTube. I know we're getting off on a tangent here because we did start on the Great Lakes carriers, but I think we're making it, there's a path to this because we talked about the Jeep carriers and we talked about the Jeep carriers of Taffy 3 at the Battle of Leyte Gulf where the Yamato came up there, right?
Right.
And you had these smaller craft, destroyers, destroyer escorts, and frigates, which were about the only things protecting this flotilla of Jeep carriers. And they were they weren't firing at the main armor, the big target of the ships. They started firing at the superstructures. So everything above the deck, just to try to cause as much damage and take out their gunnery their sighters and their radio and their control of their, and they took a waxing, they took a spanking, but they did enough damage that they turned the Japanese around, and I think they actually sunk 2 cruisers.
Wow.
Yeah. So, Matt, the producer here, pulled up a picture of Glenview, and like I said, I'm from that age now where I'm comfortable because I know how to use a rotary dial phone, and I could read cursive, and I could read an analog clock, and if I could find the payphone, I know how to use it, right? And so I remember when Glenview Naval Air Station was open, and it was an active duty base. It was active duty Glenview Naval Air Station, and a couple times I flew out of there on space available. C-130s and a couple, which the 4-engine turboprop, and a couple times we flew out on missions on 141s, which is the jet aircraft that was replaced by the C-17. So they used to when they had the air and water show, all of the Navy and Air Force's planes would land at Glenview, and that's where they would fly out of. Now they're up at, I think they use the Air National Guard base in Milwaukee.
Glenview's interesting because it was in 1923, the United States Navy Reserve through Great Lakes had a seaplane base. And then in 1929, Curtiss Reynolds, Curtiss, the aircraft manufacturer, they wanted to build an airport and a flying club. So they built the Glenview Airport. And right after it opened, it was like 9 days after it opened, the stock market crash hit. Okay. Wow. And the private pilot stuff started to wane a little bit. And in 1930s, they had 2 major air shows. They had the National Air Races in 1930, and they had the Internationals in 1933, which were sponsored by the American Legion and the Girls Flying Club. And in 1936, Curtiss Reynolds Airport leased it to the Navy. And in 1940, Rear Admiral John Downs, Commandant of the 9th Naval District, moved into the area, and the Navy purchased it in 1940 for $530,000. And then with the outbreak of World War II, they formed it as a training center for Navy pilots. And they had at that time, a $12.5 million construction, and they purchased an additional almost 570 acres. So that's when Glenview became what it is. Now, it's sad. I thanks for putting up that picture. There's the only remnant besides that tower and a few things is it's a Navy Stearman is in the center of the Van Mauer department store. In fact, I went there 2 weeks ago to see it, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's really sad because that was an important area. And, that's all that's left of it is that tower and the airplane inside the store. And, it makes you really sad because Illinois was a real important aspect in the war, and in fact, even after World War II, I mean, it was an area for Navy pilots, and I think Mayor Burns' husband got killed there, and in a training accident in the early 1960s, and then it was used in 1962 for the blockade of Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then it was a returning point into the United States in 1973 for the prisoners of war from Vietnam, and it was used in Desert Storm in 1991, and then the government decided to downsize and they sold it in 93. I mean, it's really sad. It's such an important part of American history,
It was the Base Realignment and Closing Act, the BRAC. And
Right.
Illinois took a huge spanking in that. And you could thank the politicians. Not that I don't want to make this political, but we lost O'Hare Military, which was a big Air Force Reserve base, and they were flying refueling missions over to Europe and everywhere else out of there. So O'Hare is the major airfield, the major hub that if we go to a war or something, that troops can move out of there. It's got access through the highway. It's got the airfields that can handle the big aircraft and everything. We could just move them out quickly. Now we got to go down to Scott Air Force Base. Well, okay, we kept Scott Air Force Base. They didn't build it up anymore. It's just Scott Air Force Base. They closed Chenot Air Force Base, which was really training place. I mean, they had an airfield there, but it wasn't being used. But then they also closed, let me see, they closed the north part of Fort Sheridan and left half of it as a reserve post. They closed Glenview and left us with Great Lakes, which they say they expanded. They did expand a little bit because they closed down San Diego as a training base for the Navy. Now every Navy recruit goes through boot camp only at Great Lakes. All right, so yay, a little bit, but they really took away from us a lot more than they gave than they said. I mean, you got Virginia just littered with military bases, just everywhere. You can't blink without finding a military base. Yay, Virginia. Texas closed down some, but Texas has a lot. But I think our great politicians in Illinois were happy to give that stuff away, especially O'Hare Military, where they quickly converted it to rental car spots. Yay.
That's important,
That's important.
That's where government importance is,
That's important. No, so yeah, there was a lot of history out there for the Navy in Glenview, a lot of history of the Great Lakes. Now,
well, Midway, Air National Guard. I mean, I went to get your medal down in Kankakee. It's now moved to Kankakee, Yeah. I mean, really great,
That was interesting, the medal, the Abraham Lincoln Medal of Freedom. When I finally did go down and get it, where I had to go all the way down to Springfield, they threw a broken box at me. Literally, this warrant officer, I was a warrant officer, and she literally threw a broken box, plastic box with the medal in it at me. Because,
Wow.
I says, listen, here's my orders, give me the medal. And I was like, man, that's really rude of you.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, but then we had the big thing, and I got to give a few props here to the Illinois National Guard. I think one of their greatest training bases is Marseilles. That is an underrated place. The ranges are underrated. The money that was put into there was well used. Also, when they rebuilt the military academy at Camp Douglas in Springfield, that military academy, the buildings that they used for those National Guard military academies, those are fantastic. That was a great use of money. I don't know exactly how much they spent, how much they went over budget, but at least those buildings are being used well. All right, so we got about 3 more minutes, So, Paul, what should we talk about next week?
I don't know. Anything you feel that do you have an interest in anything?
Oh, lots of stuff. I got to kind of pare down my interest because otherwise I can't focus. I've got the attention. I don't have a very long attention span, but I want to focus my things, especially like on this radio show. But for those of you that like the radio show and you don't want to wait till next week to catch another radio show, you can catch most of our radio shows. I think I did one pre-recorded radio show on how to publish a book on Amazon, but you could see our shows at cgr.silink.net, and it'll give you a link to the Chief Guard of the Republic YouTube channel, which we have up there, and I upload all of our shows onto that. I do take out the commercials and everything. So you could watch it straight through, and it's free. It's on YouTube. There's no charge to watch any of this. It's premium content. Right, Paul?
Right.
Yeah. I think we should start doing a once-a-week blog, vlog,
Sure.
vlog. We could do it.
Yeah.
We could do it through Zoom, set it up, and if we need to, if the weather goes bad and everything, we could always send Matt here, our producer, a pre-recorded show to throw on.
Now, how do you find it again on it's CGR Silink?
cgr.psylink.net.
CGR.
Maybe we could do a show about the different military museums and the driving distance from Chicago. You want to do that?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Let's do one and a little bit about what each one has. And then, let's limit it to Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. We do some research on that.
Yeah, let's do that. Because, it's important that people know, about things and history. And some people are interested in flying, Navy, Army. Let's do something on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I could research that. I could put up a link to all the museums on our webpage.
Sounds good.
cgr.silink.net. And I'm going to upgrade that webpage to make the links a little better, especially to my link, just plain old silink.net, where you get all my novels. All right. Goodbye.
Take care, man. Have a good week.
Thank you very much.
Mike.
See you next week. Bye, Paul.
Good luck with the Jeep.
I will. Want to read some action-packed, exciting pulp fiction? Read the works of Michael Tooman, now featuring the international crime thriller, I Married a Bot Madam. Available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle editions. The paperback is also available at other book retailers. Check out Michael Tooman's webpage at silink.net. That's Papa, Sierra, Yankee, Lima, India, November, Kilo, dot, November, Echo, Tango. Join your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvid on our weekly radio hour, Chief Guard of the Republic, where we talk about all things national security, defense, personal security, safety, and dealing with law enforcement situations. Call in 847-931-1410. Ask us questions. We will get you answers. Every week, Saturday, noon to 1 on 1410 AM WRMN Elgin. Streaming on WRMN1410.com. Chat with us on WRMN's YouTube live channel.
Your hometown radio station since 1949. We are WRMN AM 1410 Elgin time, 1 o'clock.
Breaking news this hour at townhall.com. I'm Bob Agnew in Washington. President Trump's tough immigration policies have contributed to a big decline in illegal border crossings.
During the first 18 days of President Trump's second term, federal agents arrested nearly 11,000 illegal immigrants. That surpassed the total number of apprehensions under former President Joe Biden. Additionally, the Trump administration successfully pressured Mexico to deploy 10,000 soldiers to the U.S.-Mexican border. That was following a threat to impose a 25% tariff. Ken Lorman reporting.
Former Senator Jim Talent says it should come as no surprise that